We will start now with our next speaker, Dr. Tripti Vishesh. Tripti is an associate professor here at Lake Alfred, the Citrus Research and Education Center, and she is a very esteemed citrus horticulturist studying fruit growth patterns, and especially most recent work with fruit drop and the use of plant growth regulators, and has been doing a lot of great work in that, and especially with our grove management, integrated grove management systems. With the degrees from the University of Georgia, we still love her at the University of Florida. So her presentation title is Rootstock Options for Finger Limes. Tripti.
Thank you, Ruth. Okay, I think I can share my presentation. And it is in the slideshow mode now, right?
Sure looks like it.
Okay, all right. So good afternoon, everybody in the United States, and just hope everybody is enjoying this symposium. In my today's talk, I'm going to talk about the rootstock options that we have here in Florida. And generally, I don't work with, I'm more interested, or my research focuses on fruit drop or nutrition. And because of that reason, I've been working with different rootstocks. I will try my best to give you the best answer. Otherwise, Dr. Dutt is the person who will be able to answer some of the questions here. So before we get into the rootstock options, there are a few things which we have already discussed today, but the very first thing, it's relatively new to Florida, so we are still learning a lot about it. I think the oldest planting are only 4 or 5 years old, so there's a lot to be learned about this. Now, in addition, Florida has very warm temperatures and we get a lot of rainfall. So our growing conditions are quite different, which gives trees a very heavy or high growth rate. So the selection of a rootstock also depends on that, because our trees just grow a lot faster. Then our soils are poor. Generally speaking, in Florida, they are very sandy soils which don't hold nutrients good. So we need to have a good fertilization program for our any plant that we are growing. And with rootstocks, it's more critical, because roots are the ones that are going to take up the nutrients. So we have to select something that is going to be appropriate for the trees. And high soil pH is a problem. And we want to select rootstocks that have good buffering capacity and can hold on or do better under high pH condition. Now, we do have HLB pressure, and finger limes so far seems to be pretty promising, and they are tolerant. I think they are tolerant, they are not resistant. So that is just another thing to keep in mind, that because of the HLB pressure, even the trees are doing really good, but it's out there. So before I get into the options, very quick thing about the tree. A citrus tree that we have in the commercial planting, it's a combination of a scion and rootstock, and we have to choose both of them pretty carefully. And also, like before I started my talk, it's really a good idea to purchase your trees from a certified nursery. Generally, when you are purchasing a tree from a nursery, here is an example of one of the labels that I had in my greenhouse. So you will see the nursery name, the nursery registration, tree variety, and the rootstock. And I think it's really important that you select it very carefully and get the right rootstock and scion, and get it from a nursery so that they are clean and you at least have a good start. So rootstocks are the part that is grown below ground. So if anything below the trunk, that is the rootstock. And there are many advantages of having the rootstock. First is, with the rootstock, you can choose something that can grow in particular soil type, without compromising your fruit quality. So you can have, let's say, if we are in the coast Indian River region, then we want to have sour orange as our rootstock because that does relatively better there. But you can choose any scion there. Or if you are in ridge, we are learning there are some newer rootstock that do very good in the root soil type that we have here. So rootstock has many, it can influence the tree growth and it has many benefits. It can make trees more tolerant to certain pests and diseases. Also, rootstock has an influence on how a tree responds to the cold and freeze damage. So many benefits there. But in addition to that, rootstock will influence the fruit size with the tree size. So rootstock that grows faster will also have its influence on the fruit, because the fruit will also get some of those traits. So rootstock can influence the size of the tree, fruit size, fruit quality, and the yield of the tree. So there are many benefits to it. And that's why we have to have a very careful consideration for which rootstock to plant. And then you'll be stuck with it for a long time too. So here in CREC, Dr. Dutt and I have been working on a project where we have been looking at different rootstocks. And you can see this photograph here shows the, so these are the rootstocks grown in our greenhouse, or the trees grown in our greenhouse. And you can see they are set from not smaller to the higher. So we were able to see some really interesting pattern in a short time too within the nursery when we were growing them in the greenhouse. We have about 15 rootstocks here that were chosen. And so far we have seen that the bud take in C22 and UFR 17 is poor. And then there are few rootstocks that are growing at a very slow pace. So US 812, Cleomandrin, C22 and UFR 16 and 17 are showing a slow growth rate, but then there are some others that are showing really good growth pattern. Here is a graph. What you're looking at is different rootstocks. So each line is a different rootstock, and we are looking at the average growth rate that we studied for about 24 weeks. Dr. Dutt did it, and what we have seen is UFR 5 has been doing exceptionally well. It is one of our highest growing or highest growth rate rootstock. Kaharski and Wolf Lemon are the top 3 candidates. And on the bottom side, we have the green is C22, and then we have 812. So it's very similar to what we are seeing with the bud take. If there's a poor bud take, we are also seeing those rootstocks doing growing at a slower rate. So UFR 5, Wolf Lemon seems to be quite promising. Swingle, which is our general commercial standard, we can say it's mediocre. Actually, it's better than the average rootstock. So it is also in top 5. So Swingle is doing fairly good too, compared to some of the rootstocks. Now, we do have this rootstock trial that is going on. So the same rootstocks that were studied in the greenhouse, we have planted them in the field. The block was planted in 2017, so it has been in ground for almost 5 years or 4.5 years now. So we have different rootstocks, and you can see all the different rootstocks that we have. And they were selected either because they show a vigorous growth nature, or they are popular in Florida or California, or they have shown some tendency to be tolerant to HLB. So that was our selection criteria. Dr. Dutt did this one, and he has been studying these rootstocks. But anyways, so in this trial, we are using DPI 50-36 as the scion because that was available at that time in Florida. And now we have been just keeping these trees under standard management. It's only now when we are starting some nutrition trial that I'll be discussing later on. So far, for the trees have been in ground for 4 years, and we have not found any HLB positive trees yet. So that is really a good news. No CLAS detection so far. And we have also not seen citrus canker on these trees. That is another good news. So this is what the trees looked like when we planted them. We have this block and there's all these different rootstocks, a replicated trial going on, and this is a close-up of the tree. We do see spring flush. These trees flush a lot because they grow a lot, and generally the flush that we see is the purple colored one, and then eventually it becomes green. So if you see that, don't be alarmed. And here's an example just to show you the difference in the growth rate. We are looking at C22 here and Volk lemon here in 2 years, and we were able to see pretty interesting differences in the growth pattern. Volk doing really good. So 2-year-old trees. This is one of the vigorous growing rootstocks here. And then we have our 4-year-old trees. They have been growing really well. They are bushy, thorny, as you would expect from a finger lime. So now we have started our nutrition trial, and before starting that, the trees are in their commercial producing time period, like we expect them to be producing good amount of fruit now. We have tried to see what trees are generally doing and how they are rated for their canopy growth. So the first graph that you're looking at is the canopy density. So what canopy density is, simply it measures how many leaves or how dense the tree is. The denser the tree, more generally speaking, more healthier the tree is because it has lots of leaves and it can photosynthesize a lot. So, and here, higher number is a good number. And I have arranged the rootstock from the low to the high density. And we are seeing a Volk lemon to be doing really good and USA to do. The bottom graph that you're seeing, it's the canopy volume. That just shows how big the tree is. And we are seeing some remarkable differences here too. There's quite a bit of range here in our rootstocks. Sour orange is like about 5 meter cube, whereas our 802 or Volk lemon are double or bigger than that. So altogether, what we are seeing is that Volk lemon and US 802 are consistently doing really good. And they are the top 2 growing habit-wise, whereas C22 is not doing that good. That is more consistently on the lower side, and Cleo Mandarin would be the other one that is on the lower side. So now let's just briefly talk about the fertilization guidelines for finger lime, because like we are seeing that finger lime have a really high growth rate, especially in Florida. We have good weather to support that high growth rate, which means that there is a high nutrition requirement for the trees. It is suggested that we apply 3 to 4 times fertilizer on these trees so that there is fertilizer throughout the year. Also, finger lime produce fruit throughout the year. So we want to make sure that each growing fruit is getting fertilizer, and so that we have a good quality fruit. Now, a balanced and complete fertilizer is always, so do not just focus on NPK, but all the 14 nutrients should be in your fertilizer blend. And I'll get to that in a couple of slides. And it is best that we have a soil applied program, but with some foliar sprays too, because foliar sprays can influence the fruit quality especially. And we want our finger lime fruit, it's mostly targeted for the fresh market. So having some foliar sprays that are specific to the fruit quality can be beneficial. So more specific about the nutrients, nitrogen is really needed because the trees are growing vigorously. So focus on nitrogen should be there. And then potassium sprays also can help with the tree, but also potassium is known to improve the fruit size in citrus. So having some potassium sprays can be helpful if you are trying to attain a bigger fruit size. And then potassium and calcium can improve the peel integrity, and we want a good fruit that will have a good shelf life too. So potassium and calcium sprays traditionally have been used, and they have potential. Excessive nitrogen should be avoided because excessive nitrogen is not good generally, but also it can reduce the fruit quality, and we don't want the fruit quality to deteriorate. And then the last thing that I would like to say is that it is really important to have good irrigation, especially for the fruit size and fruit drop. When I was listening to David earlier, the first talk, he mentioned about fruit drop being an issue in with some of the growers. And we are learning that a good irrigation pattern good irrigation program can reduce the fruit drop. So we do want to make sure that our trees get water, especially in Florida from February to June. It's pretty dry, and so having good irrigation program at this time when the fruit is set is really essential. Okay, so leaf nutrient analysis. This is what we have been doing in this same trial. We are studying how different rootstocks are doing and what nutrients are getting accumulated, or that also tells us a little bit about each rootstock's nutrient uptake potential. And of course, we want to use a rootstock that will help the tree in getting bigger, but we also want to have a rootstock that will have a good nutrient profile so that we can reduce our fertilizer inputs and just have a more efficient rootstock. So in these panels, what you're seeing is we have the rootstock, and then I have each an individual nutrient here. The first three NPK, they're color coded because those are our macronutrients. The bottom one are our secondary nutrients. And then the next slide will have the micronutrients. And I have arranged each of this table from the lowest to the highest concentration of each nutrient. So one interesting thing, they all have been receiving the same fertilizer program for last 4 years, but we can see significant differences in their nutrient profile. We have been putting out a good amount of nitrogen for their tree age, but you can see the values are pretty low. It's 1.4 to 1.7. And if you have grown citrus, this is a low number for nitrogen. And even though we are putting out a good amount of nitrogen, the trees are just growing so fast that we have to apply more and more nitrogen to keep it. And same is for the potassium. We are seeing potassium also on the lower side in these trees. Pretty much all the nutrients because the trees are vigorously growing. So when we look at the growth pattern and these nutrient profiles, some of the interesting things that we are seeing is that as the nitrogen goes up, we are seeing more growth. As the potassium goes up in the leaf, we are seeing more growth, and same pattern for calcium and magnesium. So needless to say that we have to have these nutrients to keep producing to make good trees. Now, some rootstocks are doing fairly well, like UFR5 is good with the nutrient accumulation, and possibly it has a good nutrient uptake capacity for the macronutrients. And then often you will see that Volk lemon is always on the bottom, which means it is showing a good nutrient accumulation. And if you remember, the Volk lemon was the one that had one of the highest canopy density and canopy volume. Now we are looking at the micronutrients, zinc, boron, manganese, and iron. And interestingly, Volk lemon was, for all the 4 nutrients, was consistently on the top. And then UFR5 is pretty much on the top too. So similar to what we are seeing with their growing habits, we are seeing a good nutrient accumulation in these rootstocks. That is good. And Carrizo is on the bottom here. Now, what we have seen overall when we look at the growth pattern and the nutrient accumulation, higher the manganese in the leaves, higher is the growth rate, higher the iron, higher the growth rate, and higher the zinc, higher the growth rate. So having a rootstock that can take these nutrients pretty well is going to help. And here the Volk lemon seems to be good. Another thing, just because I work a lot with the nutrition, so that I find interesting, that we are getting good zinc numbers here. These trees are doing fairly well in taking up nutrients. Zinc getting to 60, anything above 50 is usually a challenge with the zinc, and we have been only applying soil applied. So all these rootstocks that I'll say are in 60s, it's really good. And we are learning more and more about zinc, that zinc is needed, helpful for the HLB trees especially. Talking about HLB trees, there has been a lot of literature that shows that micronutrients are known to improve performance of HLB affected trees, especially zinc and manganese. So any rootstock that can take up these nutrients it's going to contribute to a better tree performance. Now, even though these finger line trees are tolerant to HLB, in fact, so far they have not shown any HLB symptoms. So HLB is not a concern right now for these trees, but because these trees have a good, or these rootstock have a good nutrient uptake potential, it is very likely that they will perform very well if they get HLB. But so far, fingers crossed, they have not got HLB, and we want to keep it that way. So talking about the ongoing trial, we have 2 separate nutrition trials that have just started. So the trial 1 is to identify the required nitrogen fertilizer rate, and we are evaluating 10 rootstocks in this. So we have 3 rates of nitrogen that we are evaluating: 100 pounds per acre, 150 pounds per acre, and 200 pounds per acre. And we are looking at 10 rootstocks, how they will respond to it. And then we also have another trial that we are looking into controlled release fertilizer versus regular fertilization. There has been a lot of reports that controlled release fertilizer does fairly well compared to regular fertilizer, and we just want to see if finger lines would benefit from that, because finger lines grow a lot throughout the year. So for that reason, altogether, to conclude from my study, or so far what we are learning about the rootstock, that choice of rootstock is dependent on expected tree and fruit traits that we want. If you want a bigger tree, then going with a vigorous rootstock like Volk lemon, UFR5 or 802 would be a good candidate in Florida conditions. And a vigorous rootstock will influence tree and fruit size, making them bigger most likely. Sour Orange, C22, and Clio are producing small trees. So if tree, you don't have a lot of space, or you're going to go for a density, like a high density planting, maybe they will be the option for that. Swingle performance is average at this point, so it's not it's average. And I want to point that out because a lot of times it's difficult to get some of these newer rootstocks. So Swingle is doing fairly well, and it's not our worst performers. That is an option if that is more easily available. Good nutrition program is critical to sustain all the growth that we see, and specific nutrient requirement studies are underway right now. With that, I'll end my talk, and I'll be happy to take any questions if you have.